I am sure all of y'all were just like me this 4th of July weekend, hanging out by the fireworks and thinking, I wonder if figure skating popularity is going to improve this year in the U.S. Let's dive in to some of the barriers to growth in figure skating's popularity in the U.S. and think of ways that can help improve the popularity of figure skating in America. But before then, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more figure skating related content. So America's nearly swept the gold medal podiums at Worlds in Boston this year in 2025. One would have predicted that this right here would make the people of my country immediately grab a bald eagle, deck themselves out in American flags, and then run to the nearest ice arena. But not so fast. There are, though, unfortunately, a lot of barriers to really helping the sport improve, and that is including accessibility, star power, as well as many different mediating variables that we can't quite control. Figure skating was in its heydays in the 90s and the early 2000s. When I was a kid, skating was everywhere. I could buy a magazine that had Oksana Baiul in it. I could watch an ice show on TV. I could buy a tape of the Nutcracker and play it in a VCR. And I could get real into either both the amateur or the professional figure skating world. There was just so much exposure to it. It was everywhere. On TV, there were figure skating stars. On the soup cans. On everywhere. And of course, then there was the decline of figure skating popularity. What's really intriguing is Scott Hamilton, in an interview several years ago, attributed the Nancy Kerrigan and Tonya Harding scandal to the decline in figure skating. And it's not what you think, actually. The first time I heard this quote, I was just like, what's he talking about? It was so popular because of that. But one thing he pointed out that made a lot of sense is figure skating got tons of endorsements, tons of money based on the 94 Olympics rating. And that was probably, and probably still is, the largest rated figure skating event ever. I could be wrong, but probably. I mean, as a kid, I watched it in real time, watched the practice, watched the short program, the free skate, just everything, like watched it so much. Everyone was glued to it. But then, because the money given was like millions based upon that rating, when you get to the next Olympics, it is not as highly rated to be expected. So what happens then? It's seen as like, okay, why are we funding this when there's such a sharp decline or there's nowhere near as much popularity as there once was? And then suddenly the funding was pulled back. That makes a whole lot of sense. So in reality, if you think about it, it was all Tonya and Nancy. That's all that did it. Okay, not exactly, but that is a variable at play here. There are many other variables, which I'll get into. While examining the decline of figure skating popularity over time, there are so many factors that are confounding variables to consider. And I found myself, to be honest, going down this huge rabbit hole that I had to stop myself from continuing. For example, financial crises in America, including like economic crash, current inflation, and so on, are huge factors to consider when observing the trends over time. And so I found myself looking at kind of like the attendance of figure skating events and thinking, oh my gosh, okay, but like maybe people didn't attend because of finances or XYZ or COVID. But then other factors to consider are also trends overall. So for example, there was a news article out about how even the drama of the Beijing Olympics couldn't get figure skating's ratings up. However, the Beijing ratings were down lower kind of overall, it seems like, compared to the 2018 Olympics. And it looks like the Winter Olympics, honestly, has just been less popular over time. Now, I'm not quite sure what that's about. I mean, we do know that in 2018 and 2022, those Olympics were in Asian countries, which means, you know, many of us were either at work or asleep during many of the competitions. So, for example, I was writing up an evaluation while also watching in real time Alexandra Trusova reacting to getting the silver medal. So those are also factors to consider. So see, this is why I'm trying to be cautious about kind of all the potential rabbit holes. But do know that even though there are all these factors, I'm not saying figure skating popularity has not declined over time, but that it's not as simple as saying figure skating is declining, if that makes sense. But what I also do know is it's also hard to really look for patterns or trends in the data in terms of attendance ratings, because that is not exactly readily available online. Now, ratings are that's a little bit easier to find, but like looking at U.S. Nationals attendance. And of course, I know there's many variables, like depending on the location, if it was during a COVID year and so on. But strictly looking at the numbers before thinking about all those variables, it takes a journey just to find those numbers. And I know that's not contributing to the figure skating decline, but I have to think about how there has to be somebody out there with USFS who's in charge, maybe, of kind of keeping track of these things when thinking about the growth. At least I hope so. So, for example, when I was trying to find the 2023 U.S. Nationals attendance, I kept reading about how it was low, but I couldn't find an exact number. Then when I was looking at the 2024 U.S. Nationals attendance in Columbus, I ran across a local article that said that was attended quite well, with 60,000 in attendance, which was 53% more than 2023. So that's really the only way I was able to get that number. And it does look like Wichita ranged from either 50,000 to 100,000 in attendance. So it doesn't seem like there was a huge decline, although to be honest, as a member of the audience of that competition and the 2024 one, it felt like it was less attended in some events. So that was a little disappointing because I just love looking at numbers. Wanted to share some numbers with y'all, but every time I looked for objective evidence, I either got incorrect numbers I couldn't verify, and so on. But what we can say with certainty is figure skating has declined in terms of popularity since the 90s and 2000s. What's also interesting, though, is if you compare Boston World's attendance in 2016 and kind of some estimates I found online of Boston World's attendance in 2025, it looks like both of these events were very well attended. And it's interesting because when I was in Boston this year, I felt like figure skating was so alive again. And I understand like Boston's like a figure skating city, but I'm just curious, like, what makes that world so alive and bustling in the terms of figure skating compared to others? Like Montreal, yes, it was like off the hook awesome as well. But like thinking about the energy in the building and everything, I just don't know. Like you would have felt like it was the 90s when you were in 2025 Worlds. In terms of looking just at ratings, from what I could find, it seems as if there's been kind of this fluctuating improvements, declines here and there, slight increases, slight decreases. I don't know though, like if you were to take this and actually look at it, would this be considered statistically significant? And I mean slight fluctuations since like 2022. And it's also difficult to compare like USA Network versus ABC versus NBC. So there's where all these other variables go into as well. And it's even difficult to try to look for trends because almost everything is referencing how figure skating was so popular in the 90s and not anymore. I do know in 2014, there were like a billion articles about how figure skating was dying. Like there are some pretty interesting quotes from our skaters. Overall, it's really hard for the sport to grow because there's not a whole lot of options for someone to stumble upon figure skating. You almost have to be a super fan in order to watch it. So, for example, most of the competitions are on Peacock. As y'all know, Peacock says hunt in 72 hours. Like, that's when we're suddenly going to get sued. And I'm sure there actually is something stupid like that. Then there goes the competitions forever. If you have a VPN, you can watch some of the skating, but you're not going to be able to watch nationals. And again, that's something that only maybe like a super fan would do. Like it'd be hard to get like some rando on the side of the road, say, hey, watch this competition. I'll have you VPN it. And then really when it is shown on TV, it's not really in the best like prime time because most of the competitions are really either happening in a daytime or if you're there in person, they do alter it a bit to try to make some things in the prime time. And then it's really only shown about like once. And that just is so unfortunate because there's people like my dad, like if he sees skating on, he'll watch it just because he knows I watch it. And it always cracks me up because I know actually when I'm at a competition, when skating is actually being shown on TV at that time, because I get a text being like, Dad just realized that you're probably not home right now, right? And I'm like, pretty much. Because we tend to honestly keep that from him because he'll worry. But it's just always so endearing that he watches skating. Or my best friend will be texting me like, oh, wow, so-and-so did this. And so, yes, it's out there occasionally for people to stumble upon, but really not that much. And then it's not available on YouTube unless you have a VPN. Not only is there a whole issue with availability due to streaming rights, music rights, and so on, but there's also gatekeeping at the federation level, believe it or not. So first, let me start off by saying that while I'm using this as an example of problems with accessibility, I do understand that the following situation that I'll explain is well within USFS's rights, but I still feel like this highlights a good example about visibility problems. Following US Nationals in 2025, I posted a shaky fan cam video of Ilya's gala performance to No Time to Die by Billie Eilish. It was incredibly obvious that it was not done from a professional, that it wasn't screen recorded from any showing that would have been on TV, though to my understanding, this has only maybe been shown in Japan and not US. And in fact, this was before they ended up showing the gala in Japan. But anyway, you could also awkwardly hear my trademark woos. So there's all these factors and all these things that make you realize like this is a fan cam. It got so much traction, y'all. Not only were there skating fans excited to see it, like I was surprised by how many people were like, I'm not a skating fan, but this is cool. How neat to see someone skate to this song. It was really picking up a lot of traction to the point where before I was forced to take it down, it got 40,000 views. And this was within a couple days. And so do know also, I had no financial incentive to post this video as at the time I wasn't monetized. And even if I had been at that time, keeping the music in it meant that either it made it ineligible for monetization or I'd have to like share the revenue. So this was simply really cool to have just to see people getting excited. So then I get a copyright takedown request submitted by USFS for this video. And I verified with the email address provided that this was indeed USFS. And luckily the person showed me their credentials, emailed me from a USFS email. It all checked out. So I was actually pretty mortified, and I explained in the email that I didn't realize fan cams were not allowed, and I apologized profusely because I really didn't want a faux pas. And fortunately, this person was so nice that I spoke with, incredibly understanding, told me, this was what he was asked to do, reminded me to take the video down so I wouldn't get a copyright strike. And I was also so fortunate that this was just a copyright removal request and not copyright strikes, because those are more harmful to your channel. However, to this day, I still have some questions, so I don't know if this can happen again with any fan cam footage. What's interesting is I do notice from time to time if there is a competition in America, you will see sometimes the fan cam videos disappear from YouTube. And so I don't know if that is due to music or if that is due to USFS. And so I have been actually a little concerned. So this is why you will only see my skating videos that I take when I'm discussing the competition or the gala or something at length. And so this is something for people to keep in mind. I always try to tell people it's not just the music rights that can get you in trouble, but also to be thinking about network when you're posting figure skating videos, but also the federations. But something to think about, though, is this video was getting so much traction and now it's just gone. And this keeps happening in different situations to different people where they're posting videos. And yes, the networks or the federation own the rights to those videos. But then some of these things go to no longer be available online at all for anyone to ever watch again. For example, it was around Nebelhorn 2024 time where all these videos kept getting taken down that people were watching in order to actually see the competition. I completely get that the channel that streamed it has the rights to it, but there's also no way to pay for it if you want to watch it later. And so really these competition videos just go to die. Like, I'm someone who loves to watch an old competition, especially during the off season, especially one where it's kind of so far back that I don't exactly remember who maybe got like silver or bronze. But it was just fascinating to me how so many of these Nebelhorn videos were quickly taken off and you just couldn't watch them. So I do worry about figure skating growing if there's no avenue online for either performances or the competitions to be watched. Yes, we can VPN some things, but it's also difficult to tell your friends, hey, okay, here's how you VPN, here's how you do this. And then sometimes the VPN will not cast to your TV. So it's just difficult to get these competitions out there for people to watch them. So I know this right here is not, of course, the federation's fault. You know, they have to have some kind of way for people to access it on TV. They have to have maybe TV rights to it. But there are just kind of all these factors that really make it difficult for people to watch skating. In addition to network rights limiting how much people can view in terms of competition or even a program here or there online, a huge prohibiting factor is the whole music rights fiascos. So even if NBC wanted to post a video, they would either, one, have to mute it, two, keep it up, not get it monetized because of the music, or run the risk of someone running a copyright claim against them. Although YouTube has some good things in place that can scan your video and tell you immediately, like, if the song's going to make it to where no one can see your video because you're going to get in trouble, basically. So I can't help but wonder, like, how much of this is NBC not wanting to have a video up, getting millions of views that they can't really monetize. But then I know USFS has been posting old competitions and practice sessions from nationals, but they have either sometimes muted or replaced the music. And I 100% understand they want to either monetize or prevent the risk of getting sued, but it does take you out of the performance, regardless of what someone does to try to prevent getting in trouble. So like when they mute the videos, it's just not as pleasing to watch. And I'm someone also that has posted some videos about music and people do tend to get mad. But also when they replace the song, even if you're replacing a song with something that's so many beats per minute, that's similar to the song the skater skated to, it's just not quite the same because you don't have the feelings from the arena. You can't hear, again, like the people cheering. The volume doesn't quite mimic what the arena music sounds like. So it's either down too low or in your face or it doesn't quite line up. So I get it. It's an attempt, but it's just difficult to really fully get into the performance when it's been altered like that. And I have concerns just from conversations here or there that I've read online that eventually skaters are going to get to a point where they have to only use music that is in a database for people to use. And it's going to be so hard for figure skating to grow if people are only skating to like bizarre free music or music that is from 9 million years ago. It's going to also be really hard for some of the skaters to go viral. So for example, like Ilya, yes, he goes viral because he does really well but also a lot of people get real into the music he uses, like the youngins do, and it's just going to be harder for people who don't watch figure skating to latch on. In terms of figure skating in the media, again, a confounding variable to think about how the increase in interest has gone up lately is discussions about, of course, the tragedy, legacy on ice, and so on, which understandably those should be covered. And I love that they covered kind of how the skating community has come together to do all these things and to grieve together. But also outside of the tragedy, there was a lot of coverage initially after Worlds about the three. It feels weird saying three because ice dance is like one unit, but I'm just going to say 4 Americans who won world titles in Boston. And so that was exciting. In fact, people reached out to me and was like, hey, figure skating's on the news. I'm like, I know, right? And then there's been so much more coverage of Amber, and she's been in magazines. Well, actually, I don't know if magazines still print, but she's been at least on magazines' websites. The Today Show. Alyssa has been participating in interviews. And so that kind of leaves Chalk and Bates and Ilya. So hopefully they'll get more coverage and exposure when it gets closer to the Olympics. I really feel like, Chalk and Bates have a really interesting storyline that could capture many Americans' hearts because they have this whole love story. They got married. They went from only winning like silver and bronze to like being a force to be reckoned with and winning golds and being a three-peat. Maddie is a designer. Just so much stuff out there that could really drum up excitement for them so that when randos are watching the Olympics, they'll be like, oh, that's that pair. Let's let them win. And with Ilya, like all of his technical abilities can be pushed more. I mean, that does tend to be what people focus on when he is in the media. But he also has this fashion interest. He also has this kind of amusing sense of humor when he's interviewed. So like somebody get these people out there. And if not, maybe more engagement on social media. I do know Ilya, he did an AMA on Instagram, which I posted about a week ago in my video. And so if he can just get some exposure out there more, because unfortunately, videos of his skating just gets taken down. Like I had one of my interns stop by my office and she was like, hey, I saw that guy skating to the vampire stuff. And I'm like, that's my favorite group. And so then I watched him and it was cool. So like he has the potential to go viral and he has gone viral. Something to consider when thinking about popularity in America and figure skating is historically, Americans have really focused more on women in the sport. And I can't help but wonder if some of that is cultural in how many people view figure skating as this feminine sport. The U.S. women in the 90s and early 2000s used to be a force to be reckoned with when it came to winning the Olympics or even getting on the podium. In the 90s, U.S. women were more likely to either win the gold at the Olympics or podium. So in 1992, we had Kristi Yamaguchi as the gold medalist, Nancy Kerrigan getting bronze. 1994, Nancy Kerrigan got the silver. 1998 was Tara Lipinski versus Michelle Kwan, where Tara got the gold and Michelle got the silver. 2002, we had Sarah Hughes as a gold medalist, and Michelle was the bronze medalist. In 2006, Sasha Cohen as a silver medalist. And since then, in an individual event, there's been no U.S. women to podium. So a contributing factor to the decline in popularity in figure skating is the fact that until recently, there were not that many American women earning gold medals compared to other countries like Japan or Russia. And that makes it even more difficult when it comes to those four-year fans or just casual viewers of the Olympic Games who really want to champion an American. I also wonder if some of the tactics used in the past, especially during the Olympics, to really make it seem like, okay, maybe this American woman can get a gold, when us figure skating fans knew it was likely not going to happen unless a Russian failed or so on. I feel like maybe some of those tactics have backfired. So, for example, actually, in 2014, a lot of the people, of course, this is anecdotal evidence, but a lot of the people I hung out with who don't really watch figure skating, but they watch it in the Olympics times, they really thought that Gracie Gold was going to get the gold. Like, they thought there was no question about it. And of course, Gracie was going to podium. And of course, she was a strong contender. But they were quite surprised when she didn't win gold. And they seemed put off by it when skating fans are like, felt like maybe she was more likely to win bronze. And so it just, that kind of thing too, kind of backfires because you get people all revved up and excited. And then the placements are just not what they were expecting. In 2022, though, I'll say, I don't feel like there was as much kind of like these unrealistic expectations for the American skaters. However, also, because you're saying, hey, these American skaters are not going to podium likely, that might be also why some of the kind of casual fans did not watch. But regardless, it seems that having a female star power is what can help figure skating a bit. I'm actually curious to see how this Olympics plays out in terms of popularity, ratings, kind of buzzing, because I was actually quite surprised. Like in 2022, I was like, it's my time to shine. All these people who don't watch figure skating, they're going to reach out to me and go, oh my gosh, can you believe this happened? And they didn't. And I was quite surprised. Like nobody did. Like one person did, I think, actually. And so I'm hoping if there is this prospect of here's Alyssa Liu, here's Amber Glenn, they can either podium or fight for the gold, that maybe, just maybe, that might drum up some excitement. However, something to think about, though, is the Russians will not be banned from figure skating forever. And I know this is probably going to make a lot of people upset, but when you think about their technical arsenal compared to other countries, it's hard for other skaters in other countries to compete with them. And so what I predict is even if there was like a slight peak interest in women's figure skating in the US again, that it's not going to be sustained, because if women from America are still not winning, or if you're watching and you're not a huge skater fan and you're thinking like, okay, like this person could get fourth or fifth underneath the Russians, and it's going to be harder to get more casual viewers. However, we also do not know if the increased age of who can compete at the Olympics may be in favor for the Americans. This ties into the, quote, new judging system, aka ISJ. There are kind of a couple factors here. First is something I've always read about online is when people are asking like why U.S. women are no longer winning medals. I often stumble upon information out there talking about how U.S. was delayed in adapting to the IJS system. I don't know if this is so much the case still, but what is also a factor to consider is the IJS system really rewards higher technical content. Yes, there is an artistic side. However, there is a cap to how high that can go. And the cap does not quite fit the same kind of cap or ceiling that the technical points can be, which, as mentioned earlier, this feeds into kind of the U.S. women's star power. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't know how much the age change is going to be a factor here in terms of kind of like the playing field. But also what gets brought up a lot is that people in general, non-figure skating fans and even figure skating fans, have trouble understanding the IJS system. They're so used to the 6.0. This is something that Dick Button talked about a lot. I actually don't know. Like for my humans that I hang out with, this makes sense to them because it like adds up and you can see where the points are coming from. 6.0 feels more subjective. However, one could also argue that this judging system is not as objective as we think it is. So that's just something to think about and how much the judging system still is interfering with U.S. figure skating. There are so many financial aspects that interfere with the sport growing in so many ways, whether it be having skaters in the pipeline to become future stars, whether it be how much the current skaters can devote to the sport because of finances. But also when it comes to attending figure skating events, these tend to be so expensive to attend. Ticket prices just keep rising. And I understand ticket prices are probably rising for all kinds of other sports and music and so on. But then depending on the location they pick, there can also be all these extra costs that you may not account for at the moment when you're buying these tickets that are already pretty costly. For example, attending Worlds in Boston was so expensive. I almost feel like it was cheaper for me to attend Montreal. And I love Boston, and I love my time at Boston Worlds, but it was a huge blow to my bank account, to be honest. Just staying near TD Garden, yes, I could have stayed somewhere further away. It would have been cheaper, but still it's pretty expensive no matter where it was in Boston, and I love Boston. But also just looking at Lake Placid for Skate America coming up, I gave up trying to find a hotel for that, and what's left is so expensive because there's not a whole lot of hotels. So kind of the bigger places they pick are going to be expensive just because of kind of the scarcity of resources when it comes to hotels and just means of transportation to and from either the venue or just the city in general. And also, in order to really get the front row tickets, which are already expensive, you pretty much have to be a member of Friends of Figure Skating, which is another cost on top of that. So overall, it can be pretty costly to attend these events. You are in an arena all day long. Sometimes they say once you get in there, you can't leave. And then you have to pay for the food. So there's so many costs up front and so many costs when you get there. And most people have to take off like a week to attend an event. One of my coworkers, one of the few actually that likes figure skating, I have two, she used to attend figure skating events all the time. And she said, you know what, I stopped attending because it would be all my vacation. And it's true. If you go to nationals and you go to worlds, you're just cutting into a lot of your PTO. And of course, this just kind of just touches on a little bit of how finances interferes with being a fan, not even getting into the whole entire cost of coaches, cost of ice rinks, cost of skating equipment for actual skaters. So you're probably thinking, wow, you just gave me a whole lot of bleak information that I could have Googled and found already. And I understand. Is there then any hope for the sport? Thinking about kind of all these factors, to be honest, it would take more than Alyssa Liu winning the gold medal or Amber winning the gold medal at Olympics. It would take a concerted effort from USFS, ISU, networks, the music industry, so many different factors at play in order, I think, for figure skating to be able to grow. Like I mentioned earlier, I do think it has the potential to grow in some capacity. It may not be the way it was in the 90s, and it may not persist that long, depending. If there were either a huge sweep in Olympic gold medals for the U.S., meaning if Ilya won the men's, Amber or Alyssa won the women's, ice dance was won by Chalk and Bates, I think that could get some excitement drummed up. I even think just having Alyssa or Amber winning the gold in general could drum up some excitement. I don't, though, see that remaining stable unless U.S. women were to continue to keep winning and the accessibility was fixed. I think accessibility and people being able to watch figure skating is going to be the huge barrier to overcome here. All those other factors I mentioned, yes, they can contribute, the financial aspects of attending the competition and so on. But you're not going to get anybody that wants to attend if they cannot watch it in the first place to become a fan. So I know ISU talked about having a streaming option on their website or some other website at some point. That might be an option. Too bad, ISU can't have the rights in America to all of the competitions so people could freely just watch them. Or maybe there was a bizarre ad campaign of get a VPN, you can watch figure skating, yay. Like, I don't know. I feel like accessibility is going to be the major factor here combined with star power. I think those two things alone could help. Yes, the judging system is difficult for people to kind of catch on, especially when it comes to ice dance. Sometimes people are lost, but I think they're more likely to get the hang of it if they're able to watch it. And of course, this is such a simplistic way of looking at it. There's so many different factors, like I said, like financial, other factors, other variables. But those two things alone could help not make it its heyday in the 90s, but I think make it to where when I say I'm going to go watch figure skating, the first thing someone will ask is like, so are you a skater then? I get asked it all the time because people just assume if you actually watch it, you have to do it because nobody watches it. Other ways that can help kind of boost the popularity of figure skating is a topic that Scorography talked about with a figure skating stan is the modernization of skating. And I don't want to go into this in too much detail because they did a lovely job of going over the whole thing. Check out that video. But there does need to be some modernization of figure skating. And definitely Worlds showed that they are working on that. And I hope that's across the board because there has to be some kind of method out there to try to get in some younger folks watching. And I say this as someone approaching 40. So I have no room to talk because I'm kind of in that like geriatric millennial stage of life. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more figure skating related content.